With King's Fall finally being in Destiny 2, I wanted to make a guide explaining how to beat this raid. As a quick note, I won't be covering jumping puzzles as they're relatively straightforward, and loadouts and subclasses will be mentioned as we go along with each encounter. Also, if you want to skip to a certain encounter, the timestamps will be in the description below. Finally, be sure to follow me on Twitch where I stream every Tuesday and Friday where I also got all of this gameplay from. Links to all of that in the description below. With that being said, let's hop into it. Starting with the opening encounter, your team can feel free to run mostly any weapons, but I chose to run an SMG, Forbearance, and Gallahorn on an Arc Hunter for ad clear and to destroy the blight walls fast. Any ad clear or super or weapons will do fine in this encounter, so don't stress on loadouts too much. When it comes down to the actual encounter, there will be 2 relics in front of your team as you spawn. Picking these relics up will start the encounter, so make sure your team has rallied before you do so. Once you rally, pick up the relics, which will then spawn a large wall with the taken blight on it. Shoot the blight in the middle of the wall to break it and kill the ads on the other side. From there, dunk the relics. Have your team then split up into 3 groups of 2 and send 2 of the groups to the right and left pathways while one team stays in the middle. The team on each side will need to look for relics on their sides and kill the blight walls and ads that spawn. The relics will spawn in the same place for both sides, so they should be relatively easy to find. The last things to mention regarding this encounter is that once your team picks up the relics, you'll have a 30 to 40 second timer, in which if that timer runs out, the relics will leave the player's hands and will teleport back to the spot they were last at, which will be the relic's spawn point. With that information in mind, try to make your team time the grabbing of the relics by, going 3, 2, 1, then go. Once you've dunked these relics 6 times, including the starting ones, the portal and the Court of Oryx will activate, allowing you to move on. The next encounter is the Basilia encounter, which is also known as the Totems encounter. When it comes down to loadouts, roaming supers and crowd control supers will work wonderfully here. I chose to run Deadfall Tether, but Solar Titans, Stasis, and Arc subclasses will work here just fine. Regarding weapons, you'll want a sniper to take care of Boomer Knights on the ledges, and a great ad clear weapon. I chose to run Izanagi's Burden with the corrective measure and it worked wonders for me, but use what will suit you well. Finally, a weapon with an unstoppable mod on it, as there are unstoppable champions in this encounter, will serve you well. You'll want to split your team into 2 groups of 3 for this encounter. These teams will be labeled left team and right team for this encounter. Both teams will want to have 2 of their players stay in the middle, and their role will be discussed here in a moment, but I want to cover the lone player on each team. The lone players will be grabbing these orbs on each side of the room. These orbs will grant these players an aura that will protect them from the poisonous air in the next room. Players with the aura will want to run to the Annihilator totems deep within these rooms and stand on them. If your team doesn't stand on these totems, they will flare up, draining your super energy and wiping you if they are not stepped on again. While the players with the auras are on the totems, they'll want to kill any ad they see, as they'll begin to get a buff known as Deathsinger's Power. You'll get 1 stack from red bar enemies and 3 stacks from yellow bar enemies. The reason this buff is important is because you will need to dump these stacks into the middle plate in the main room. Regarding the aura, you will have a timer on that buff, and if it hits 0, you will die. Now let's discuss how you will go about removing this aura. Going back to the 4 players in the middle, they will be killing ads in the middle and killing 2 wizards that spawn on the platforms above them. Once the wizards die, a taken knight will spawn on the platforms. You need to kill this knight as it will drop what is needed to swap the aura. The buff it will drop will look like the taken relic from Last Wish and Battle of the Disciple. One player needs to grab it and run to the aura player on their side. Once you've reached them, go into the aura and hold your interact key to take the aura. The aura is swapped from there, and the old aura player should then run to the middle to dump their stacks, and the new aura player should be killing ads to gain more stacks. The third player of each group should be killing another wizard to spawn another knight to keep this process going. Both groups will want to keep this cycle going to progress the encounter. There are symbols on each side of the main door in the middle which acts as the progress meter for the encounter, so your team can keep track of the progress. Once the meter is full, the encounter will end, allowing you to move on. The next encounter is the first boss of the raid, Warpriest. The boss underwent some changes from Destiny 1 to Destiny 2, so let's cover them. Regarding loadouts, you'll want damage supers and weapons for this encounter. For supers, go for Well, Bubble, Blade Barrage, and Gathering Storm. For weapons, go for Izanagi's Burden, Witherhoard, Cataclysmic, Storm Chaser, and Taipan 4FR, as they will do great amounts of damage. Start by splitting your team into 3 groups of 2. These teams need to cover the left, middle, and right sides of the room, so have everyone split up to do so. The encounter starts once each plate is activated by having someone standing on it. When the encounter starts, ads will begin to spawn, so kill them. After a while, 2 yellow bar wizards will spawn on the left and right sides, so take care of them. Afterwards, a yellow bar knight will spawn on all sides, and this knight will start the glyph sequence of this encounter, so only kill them once your team is ready. Once they're ready, have every team stand near their plates. To start the damage phase, have your team step on the plates in a certain order. This order will be revealed by watching the order in which the 3 pillars in front of each plate glow. To activate the glows, have one player from the middle team stand on their plate. Once they do, one of the pillars in front of them will begin to glow. Everyone can see which pillar is glowing, but feel free to have the other middle player position themselves in a way to where they can see the glowing parts of the pillar easily. When you find which pillar is glowing, have the middle player step off of their plate and have the player whose pillar is glowing step on theirs. From there, another player will glow, in which the player for that side should step on their plate. Finally, the third and final remaining side will step on their plate, which will give the players stepping on the last plate a red aura, starting the damage phase. It's worth noting that if the first glowing pillar is middle, then the middle player should step off of their plate, then step back onto the plate for the pillar to register. When it comes down to the damage phase, players can only do damage to the Warpriest when they're inside of the aura, so everyone should group up somewhere to damage Warpriest. My team chose to set up on the left side for the first phase, then middle for the second, then right for the third, and then middle again for the final phase, but do as your team pleases. The aura that your team will have a timer on it that is very important to take note of. Your team will need to swap the aura before the timer hits 0. If the timer hits 0, then the current aura holder will die, and the damage phase will end. To pass the aura around, there will be a taken knight that will spawn in the middle, left, or right side of the arena. The map on screen now shows their spawn location, so feel free to use this map to aid your team. You'll need one player to locate the knight, kill it, take the buff it drops, and run back to the aura. When the aura timer reaches 1 or 2 seconds left, have the buff holder take the aura, which will then swap the aura. This process will need to be repeated one more time before your team can damage the boss in peace. When the first knight dies, the second one will spawn immediately after, so you can send another player to go and kill the knight for the buff early to be prepared. Once all the stacks of the buff have run out, and the timer runs out, your team will want to hide behind the same pillar as each other. The pillar you'll need to hide behind will be the ones in front of each plate. If you don't hide, you will die as the boss will do a wipe move. When this move ends, the pillar your team hid behind will disappear, causing you to not be able to use it for the rest of the fight. From there, rinse and repeat until the Warpriest is dead. The next encounter is Golgoroth, who is the second boss in the raid. You can use the same damage options for this encounter as you did for the last encounter, although I'd recommend your hunters go Tether or Stasis for ad control. You'll need to assign one role to 2 different players. That role is taking Golgoroth's gaze, and we'll explain what this role does in a moment, but for now let's go through the encounter. The encounter starts when you break this orb on the ceiling in the middle. Your team will have 2 streams of ads, one on the right and one on the left side to kill. Once all ads are dead, have one player stand on this half bridge towards the middle of the room and shoot Golgoroth in the back until it says that player caught his gaze. From there, the player will need to turn Golgoroth to face the players who will damage him, who should be positioned towards the spawn area. The DPS players will need to shoot down another orb from the ceiling, as this will significantly amplify their damage against Golgoroth. When the goo from the orb hits the water, the DPS players should hop into the pool to damage Golgoroth. Regarding the player who has his gaze, stand behind the players damaging him and above them so that they have an easy time shooting the boss's crit spot, which is on his stomach. Multiple times during the DPS phase, one random player who has entered the pool from the orb will get a debuff called Unstable Light that has a 6-second timer. You will need to run away from your teammates, as if you are close to them, it will kill them immediately. A fun fact about this buff is that if you get it, you can run up to Golgoroth and detonate it on him for a free 500,000 damage, so definitely do that. For the players who are taking Golgoroth's gaze, you will need to swap the gaze between each other when the timer runs low. Those players should continue to position themselves around the same areas so that your damage dealers can have an easy time killing Golgoroth. For the damage dealers, the orbs you shoot down will last for a limited amount of time. They typically disappear around the time the gaze holders switch, so as the gaze holders are swapping the gaze, you should be dropping the next orb. Once the damage phase is over, repeat the same process over again to get an easy kill on Golgoroth. The second and final encounter of this raid is the Daughters encounter, which serves as an intro encounter for Oryx since both encounters share most of their mechanics. For supers and weapons, revert back to the same supers you used during the Warpriest fight. For daughters, assign 4 of your players to a plate, as there will be one on the front left of the room, one front right, one back left, and one back right. My team chose to label the front and back plates by calling the back plates the one closest to the rally banner, and the front ones the furthest from the rally banner. The 2 remaining players should be floaters, who will take over a plate in the scenario that one player can't take theirs. When you walk into the room, you'll notice one of the plates has a knight on it. This plate is extremely important for one of the mechanics. The fight will start when the knight takes damage. Have your team kill that knight, and then have the player assigned to that plate jump onto it. When the knight dies, one player will also get a debuff known as Torn Between Dimensions, which will cause them to not be able to shoot or use abilities. They'll also be put into a third-person perspective and will have a shadowy aesthetic to them. This player will need to go to the plate that has the knight on it and get onto that plate. From there, a glowing orb will appear high above a different plate. This needs to be called out, and the player assigned to that plate will need to step on it. If the plate belongs to a torn player, then one of the floaters should step onto it. When both plates are activated, 4 platforms will appear between the starting plate and the one with the orb above it. The torn player will then need to jump on those platforms to get to the orb. Once the torn player has reached the orb and runs through it, the players can hop off their plates. Another plate will then be highlighted and another player will receive the debuff. When this happens, just rinse and repeat the same process. You'll need to do this a total of 3 times, and on the 3rd time, the torn player will grab the orb and will need to run towards the daughter that is shooting at them. When they've run to this daughter, they will need to slam the daughter, taking the aura, which will then allow your team to DPS the daughter. My team chose to position ourselves on the little platform below and across from the daughter that could be damaged, as it was easy to reach. You'll have a small amount of time to damage the daughter, but it could be possible to one phaser. When the timer runs out on the debuff, have your team stay inside of the aura as a white mechanic will happen, and anyone not inside of the aura will die. Once the white mechanic finishes, have your team repeat the same process over again to finish this encounter and move on to the final encounter. Welcome to the final encounter, Oryx. For loadouts, I'd recommend running the same weapons and most of the same supers that you used during the Daughter's encounter. For hunters, I'd suggest that they run either Gathering Storm or Celestial Nighthawk Golden Gun, although I chose to run Gathering Storm. Titans and Warlocks should be running Bubble and Well respectively. To start the encounter, run up to the floating soul at the front of the room. Oryx will then do his badass intro, which will then cause adds to spawn. You'll have some taken spawn in each corner of the room and a taken knight spawn on each plate. Once all adds are dead, Oryx will fly to a random plate in the room, in which then he will slam his fist onto that plate, and shortly after he lifts his fist, the plate will glow green, signaling one player to jump onto the plate. At the same time as that's happening, one random player will get the Torn debuff. That player will need to run to the plate that Oryx is at as well. When the starting players get onto the plate, the orb from the last encounter will be floating high above a random plate. So just like Daughters, find that plate and have that plate's player stand on the plate. Platforms will then spawn, allowing the Torn player to get to the orb. This process will need to be done 3 times. While that is going on, the other 3 players should be killing special looking ogres that will spawn in the 4 inner corners of the room, next to the plates. These ogres will drop a taken plate when they die, which your team should avoid for now. When the ogre dies, a Light Eater Knight will spawn across the walkway in the outer corners next to plates. This knight needs to die immediately because he will try to run to the taken orbs and will try to eat them, which is bad. There are 4 Light Eaters that need to die, so kill them fast. Going back to the Torn player, on the 3rd time of grabbing the orb, they will grab a buff, which will allow them to steal an aura. This aura will come from a knight that spawns from a tomb ship at the front of the room and will have a large transparent aura around them, so it's kind of hard to miss them. When the Torn player steals the aura, kill the knight and have your Torn player and one other player stand in the middle of the room. From there, have your other 4 players stand near one of the taken blades that dropped from the ogres that were killed. These taken blades are actually bombs that will stun Oryx for your team to damage him. When Oryx slams his fist into the plate again, have all of your players who are standing next to the bombs jump into the bombs until they see their name pop up in the feed. If done right, your team will have detonated 4 bombs at once. When they see their name pop up, they need to run to the middle where the aura player is and stand in the aura. If they fail to stand in the aura before the bombs detonate, they will die. Once the bombs detonate, Oryx will be vulnerable, allowing your team to damage him. It's worth noting that the more bombs that are detonated, the longer the damage phase is, so try to detonate all the bombs as closely as you can. When the damage phase ends, Oryx will go back to the center of the room, he will then do one of two moves. The first move he will do will be him sending meteors towards your team. You'll notice this move as Oryx will fly backwards into space, and your team will get flashing auras on their screen. If Oryx does this move, have all players run away from each other. The plate players should run around their plates, and the floaters should run up and down the main aisle. The second move Oryx might do is where he will spawn a large taken blight in the front of the room. When he does this, he will slowly teleport one player into the blight at a time until everyone is in there. Inside of the blight is a mini Oryx who needs to die, so have your team focus the mini Oryx. For players who are still outside of the blight, kill the thrall before they reach the blight so it does not interfere with the team inside. Once the mini Oryx dies, everyone will be sent back to the boss room. Once Oryx reaches his final stand, he'll fly back to the front of the room and spawn two of the Blight Ogres in the inner corners next to the front plates. Kill the Ogres and have one player stand next to one of the bombs. You want to have this player jump into the bomb right when it says Oryx calls upon the darkness to stun him at the right time. As this player is detonating the bomb, everyone should be shooting Oryx in his glowing chest. Once it's popped up in chat that your player has detonated the bomb, have them run back to the aura to damage Oryx. When the bomb detonates, have that same player run to the next bomb to detonate it, with the same cue. While this player detonates the bomb, everyone should be focusing the boss. If done correctly and if the damage is good, you'll kill Oryx for an easy King's Fall completion. That wraps up this video. I'll be uploading my full clear of this raid later today or tomorrow, so if you need to see what a full completion of each encounter looks like, then stay tuned for that release. If you found this video helpful, consider dropping a like and subscribing for more Destiny content dropping every week. Be sure to follow me over on Twitch and my other social media platforms where I stream every Tuesday through Friday, and I would love to see you guys come hang out. With that being said, I'm SniperKH and I'm out. Good luck with gaming.